Hello, everybody. How you all doing today? Feel free to use the chat box or to use your microphones, whatever you would like to do. Excellent. I'm glad you're all doing well. It's a nice, cool morning here in California. I don't know if everybody is from California. It sounded like we had somebody from China in the earlier session, so that was kind of cool. So hope you're all doing well wherever you're at. As we go, feel free to ask questions. You can either unmute yourself and ask questions that way, or you can type a question in the chat box and I can answer your questions there. So some of what I talked about, or what I was planning on talking about, was covered a little bit in the earlier session, in the keynote session. I'm going to reiterate a few things. So let's get started. Let's talk about what you can do to do well on your MCAT. So the first thing to by the way, I should introduce myself. I forgot to do that. My name is Doug McLemore. I'm a staff advisor and the test prep specialist with UC Davis Health Professions Advising Office. And glad to be here and getting to talk to you guys a little bit about the MCAT. So first thing you should know about the MCAT is registering and structure and things like that. It seems like this isn't important on crushing the MCAT, but it actually really is, because a lot of these things go into doing well. So registering the MCAT is actually pretty complicated process. And if you've already taken the MCAT, some of you may have already taken the MCAT, you may realize that you're going to have to sit in line. Just FYI, they just announced that registering for the May through July MCATs is going to open during the week of February 15th. That's all they've said so far, during the week of. So I would suggest that you all get on the AAMC_MCAT Twitter feed. I know some of you may not like Twitter, but it's actually a very useful thing. I'll put that @ in the chat box here, and follow them, and you will get the most up-to-date information on when registration will happen, because the AAMC loves to post on Twitter, and they do all of their official announcements on Twitter first. And so when we say you have to apply to take the MCAT, you're going to have to get your AAMC ID set up first. Then you're going to have to set up your application for the MCAT, which also includes things like signing up for the fee assistance program, which I encourage you all to sign up for and to see if it's possible to get qualified for it, because it does reduce the fee. And it also gives you some free materials, in the sense that you get all of the online AAMC materials for the MCAT for free if you qualify for the fee assistance program. And if you need accommodations, you got to get those applied for now. Like if you're taking the test, say in June, it can take 2 to 3 months to get qualified for accommodations, meaning extra time or a screen reader or whatever else accommodations you might qualify for based on what things you've qualified for in the past. So I'd encourage you guys to get started on that process, because all of this has to be in place before you really even need to start studying, because you want to know what date you're studying for. That's why it's relevant to talk about registering for the MCAT and talking about crushing for the MCAT. Is if you don't know when you're going to take it, it's easy to kick the can down the road, and it takes longer and longer and longer. So currently, by the way, if you register for a test date and need to change it, they are not charging rescheduling fees currently. That may change as of the April through later dates. We don't know for sure. The AAMC has not said one way or the other. My guess is it may continue, because we're still getting COVID cancellations as of now in January. A couple of California testing sites have done cancellations of the MCAT, and people have had to reschedule. So that is a thing that's been happening. So as far as retaking the MCAT, I think the gentleman, or the other session, the keynote session, mentioned retaking the MCAT. You can retake the MCAT up to 3 times in a 1-year period, 4 times in a 2-year period, 7 times total. I would not suggest taking it more than 3 times if you can at all avoid it. Retaking isn't a problem if you've got a reasonable score. I would agree with what he said, that if you were looking at if you're in a high 5 teens score, like 515 or higher, retaking, it's probably not a good idea. In fact, that's more than what you really need. And we'll look at what target scores are reasonable in just a moment. But if you're at a 500 or below a 500, definitely you want to retake that to get it above a 500 and get it closer to that target score that you want. It starts getting dangerous when you're above a 508 to retake. And so there's that consideration you have to take. And I would agree with what he said, is that you have to look inside and say, can I do better? Like, what did I do on this test that I should fix and make better for the next test? And it's not necessarily that you did anything wrong. It's maybe that you didn't understand a certain style of question or didn't understand a certain content area, and you could just improve upon that for the next time. So that's what you should consider when thinking about retaking the MCAT. Now, what does the test look like? And there's a lot of things in here that are important to talk about when talking about the structure. First off, there's a tutorial. Now, when you're studying for an MCAT, you should all be taking lots of practice tests. I'm going to suggest you take upwards of 10 practice tests during the time you take that you're studying for your MCAT. Overall, 10 practice tests. So do you really need to do the tutorial? I'll answer your question in just a moment, Nathan. Do you really need to do the tutorial? You've done 10 practice tests. Is it necessary? Don't forget, you guys can use the chat box or you can use your microphones. I didn't think this was a complex question. If you've taken the test 10 times, do you need to learn the instructions to take the test? Yeah, there we go. Nope, you don't need to do the tutorial. There's no reason to do this tutorial. Now, I'm going to say there's a very good thing you can do here during this tutorial. You can start the tutorial, which means you get a free 10 minutes. And what could you do in those 10 minutes? What could you do with that 10 minute of time, those 10 minutes of time? I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of it. Like, okay, I'm going to sit square and arrange my keyboard, adjust the monitor, get my mouse in the right place, breathe, relax. And I have a scratch board to the right of me, and I can start doing what I like to call the brain dump. I can start writing down my physics equations that I'm going to need for that first section, the Chem Phys section. So you actually have a free 10 minutes right when you begin the test by starting that optional tutorial and not doing the tutorial itself. And just when 10 minutes comes up or whenever you're ready to begin, finish the tutorial and move on with your merry little lives. So to answer the question that Nathan posed, do the scorers see every single attempt or even the lowest? Yes, they see every attempt because the AAMC administers the MCAT, and the AAMC is also the AMCAS, which is your application service. So they do see all of them. Like you can't just like hide a score because you don't want them to know it. So yes, they do see them all. So then we move into the Chem Phys section, and like all science sections, it shares something in common. It's 95 minutes long. You're going to have 10 passages. There's no more COVID version of the test. We're back to the full length test. And then you're going to see 44 passage-based questions, 15 discrete questions in that section. And the discrete questions I would encourage you to do first. You want to spend about 1.5 minutes per question on those. The passage-based questions, you want to probably get out of the habit of taking the time to read fully the passages, especially in the sciences, because you only get about 8 minutes to do 4 to 6 questions. So the more time you spend with the passage, the less time you actually get to spend with the questions. So you really want to just jump right into the questions most of the time, especially sciences, because the passage isn't used as much. And the question that Bayan had is, if you void it, no, they will not see it because that score does not exist. You will not get a scored test if you void it. So they will see that you voided a test. That's all they will see. Then you get into your break, optional break. It may say optional. I say take it. Because what's something you can do during the break? What are some things you should do during the break? Your parents probably warned you about this when you got in a car for a long car ride back in the day. Take a breathe. Okay, definitely. Just sort of relax. I like to call it my dead brain time. Just like stare at the wall and just let my mind go blank and refocus on that new subject. Take a stretch. Maybe have a snack, a drink of water. Go to the bathroom. That is probably the most important thing to do, is go to the bathroom, because you do not want to be coming into the car section going like, oh gosh, I gotta go. And like, that's just terrible feeling. And you don't want to do that. Then you got cars, which is of course, the reading comprehension section, 90 minutes, 9 passages, 10 minutes a passage. Now, these questions are these passages you should be reading in some way, shape, or form. You don't have to necessarily read in great detail, but you're going to use more of the passage, and you're going to have to understand the main points of the passage and things like that to answer the question. So you definitely want to work on your process of like either previewing the questions and reading the passage, or reading the passage, taking some notes and attacking the questions, or whatever it is. But notice you have about almost 2 minutes to answer each question here. That's better timing than you get on the sciences. So here you've got the time to read. Then we go into our optional mid-exam break. And here's where you definitely want to eat something. You got 30 minutes, but don't eat a hard, heavy meal. You want to eat something that's high in protein, high in complex carbs. Like protein bars, a lot of them aren't good because they contain lots and lots of like simple carbs, sugars, basic sugars. Look at the ingredients on some of those things. They're just awful. Like a good old fashioned snack that I remember from camping all those years ago is Gorp, good old raisins and peanuts. Raisins and peanuts, you get complex carbs, you get some fat, you get some protein out of that. And that's a good snack. And get out of the coffee mode. You guys drink too much coffee. I don't know what it is about coffee these days and everybody wanting to drink it, but coffee really it's a stimulant that causes a crash. And so you want to wean yourself off of coffee a little bit before you come into doing a test like this, because you don't want to be like needing that rush that's going to crash you right in the middle, like say biochem. And then you got biochem, another break, psych-soc, and then you get the void question. Now there's really only, I know the void question came up a little bit earlier, but there's only really 2 reasons why you would ever want to use the void question. Because when you get to this point in the test, are you going to feel good about the test, or are you going to feel bad about the test? Most likely. Eric, by the way, you're unmuted. Hopefully good, yeah, but you're probably not going to feel good about it. Most folks are going to feel worn out. They're going to feel, oh, that was rough. They're not going to feel positive about their performance. They're going to say, man, I screwed up this question. I screwed up that passage. You're probably going to feel really negative. Most people do. They come out of this thing worn out and negative. And that void question is really tempting because you're like, oh man, I did so bad on this. Oh, I just need to void the score. No, don't do it. There's only 2 good reasons to void. One is you're physically ill, just like you're vomiting or you're sick in some other way that's just like you can't concentrate. That's a good time to use the void question. Second is if there's a weird testing abnormality that AAMC is not going to call a testing abnormality. And that's usually something like the power goes out or the internet dies in the middle of the test, and you're sitting there for like 3 or 4 or 5 hours waiting for things to get turned back on. You might have to redo a couple questions and all that fun stuff. And so you're probably going to be stressed out, like to the point where anything beyond that is not going to go well. That's another good reason. I've seen that happen from time to time in testing centers. Nathan, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Does ambiguous question count? Can you clarify what you're asking? Are you saying if there is a one ambiguous question or there's lots of them? I would imagine that there shouldn't be any ambiguous questions. You might feel that they're ambiguous, but there should be no actual ambiguous questions. But you have overall 230 questions. Like, where does the cutoff? Like, if you have one or two questions that you feel is a weird type of question, I would imagine that's not enough to void the test. So you probably shouldn't be voiding just because you felt a couple questions are bad. That's exactly what I'm talking about, is that you're going to feel like you didn't do well, most likely, and that's not a good reason to void it. You got to trust that you are prepared and ready to rock and roll and do this thing. A lot of this test is all about fighting a mental battle and leaving that negativity about like questions, like I'm not sure what this question was doing, aside, because it's going to be one or two that's probably going to be like that. Everybody's going to feel like that. So hopefully that answers your question. Still not 100% certain what your question is though, but I think I answered it. Satisfaction survey, I don't care if you do that. Do it, don't do it, whatever. So overall, this is 7 hours and 30 minutes of sitting time. Like you're going to be in the testing center. You actually should plan on it being 8 hours because you want to get to the testing center 30 minutes early. So why do I talk about all this stuff in a Crushing the MCAT discussion? Because when you practice your tests, you need to practice it like this. You need to spend this amount of time. You need to start at the time of the MCAT. So like if you're taking the MCAT this year, by the way, how many people are taking the MCAT this year? If you're taking the MCAT this year, your start times are either going to be 7:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And you should practice appropriately. You should practice at those times. So that means getting up early. You're not just going to be able to roll out of bed. You're going to have to drive to the testing center. You've got to have your morning routine. So when you're practicing, mimic test day. Don't fake it. Other things should be there. You shouldn't be taking tests in a silent environment, because in a silent environment, that is absolutely not at all what the testing center is going to be like. The testing center is going to be a little bit chaotic. It's like controlled chaos, because there's going to be people whispering, tapping pencils, sobbing in the corner. I don't know. There's going to be all kinds of little things going on. You should take it in an environment that's not completely sterile. Another thing is use a mouse. I know a lot of people use the trackpad on their tablets or their laptops, and that is not what you get during the testing center or during the test at the testing center. And it's going to be a weird transition from a touchpad to a mouse. So do your practice tests with the mouse, not with a trackpad. So think about what the testing day is going to be like. Model that testing day 10 times in a row so that when you really go into the test, you're prepared for what you know what test day is going to bring. And like I said, this is a mental battle. And if you can get to this point where taking this test is just routine, you're not even thinking about it like it's a terrible day, it's just any other day that you've taken a practice test, you're gonna win that battle. You're gonna fight that monster that's gonna hold you back. So what other things should we think about? Well, let's talk about scoring for a little bit, just so you understand what the scoring is. The whole test is scored from 472 to 528 with section scores of 118 to 132. So everything is like sort of lined up around this middle point of 125 is about the median and 500 is about the median. So in percentile rank, you can see that right now the 50th percentile is right around a 501. So that's this year's scoring scale. This shifts a little bit. It's been drifting upwards. I think you might have noticed that with that earlier graph that showed the shifted curve. This is a scaled score, not a curved score. You're not being compared to other people. Let me say that one more time. You're not being compared to other people. You're being compared to a predetermined, statistically generated model of what should happen on these questions. So the scores are set up so that It doesn't matter which testing day, what time of the day, who else is taking the test. So don't worry about all that stuff. All that garbage on Reddit about this being compared to other people is literally that. It's garbage. So you got to take what you see on Reddit with a grain of salt. There is no guessing penalty. So even if you have no idea how to answer a question, what should you do? Guess. Just leave 0 blanks, put an answer down. I usually call it letter of the day. I will pick my letter of the day. I usually pick B for my letter of the day. And so any question that I have no clue on, I'm just going to pick B. Do know that there are actually unscored experimental questions in there, but they will not be identified. So to go back a little bit to what Nathan was asking, I think, is you might actually see a weird type of question or an ambiguous question. It's very possible it's an experimental question and it's not going to get scored anyway. So another reason why not to use the void question is because you saw a couple of those. That's a very real possibility. Now, as far as targets go, I like to use the statistics nationally. Here's what we got. If you're looking at DO school, the matriculants going to DO school have an average of 504 for their MCAT. So if you're shooting for DO school, you want to at least get to a 500, a nice happy scores of 504. So that would be a nice target if you're shooting for DO schools. If you're looking at a med school, or sorry, they're both med schools, an MD school, I always say med when I say MD, but if you're looking at an MD school, matriculants is approximately an average nationally of 512. So again, these are averages, and I don't want you to put that much stock at averages. I'm kind of using what the keynote was talking about. The tail end, those lower regions, people still get in. And I've seen people with like 520s not get into med school, guys, because the rest of their application was not suitable. And I just want to reemphasize that. Just because you don't have a 520 MCAT score does not mean you're not going to med school. It might mean that you won't get as many interviews as something else. So my rule of thumb for MD schools is you at least want a 508 to be comfortable. If you want to feel, you can still get in with a 500. I've seen plenty of people with 502s, 503s get into MD schools. So it's all about the whole package deal. But to get to that 508, that's a nice target. Just like the DO schools, 500 the minimum, 504 butter zone, 508 minimum med school, 512 butter zone. Anything beyond that, that's fine. Now, I want to address this right here. Setting a target score is important because I see people do this. I'm going to get the highest possible score I can get. I'll ask this question. So what do you want to get on your MCAT? And I will get answers of, I want to get the highest score I can get, 520s. And I will already know that person will have a very difficult time studying for the MCAT because what you've done is you've set your goal so far away and it's an unknown goal that you can't actually reach it. Shooting for the stars and you'll hit the moon, that is a terrible advice when it comes to standardized test prep. Pick a target and then incrementally get your way there. So if you took your first practice test is a 498 and you want to get to a 508, then every practice test of those 10, all you got to do is go 1 point improvement each time. Now think about that. If you're just going from a 498 to a 590 or 508, that's 1 point every time you take a test. That is approachable. That is not demoralizing when you don't hit a huge target that's unknown. This, like I said, is a mental battle. Set the stage so that you can win that mental battle. Incremental changes is something you can achieve and track, and it's a smart goal. So goal setting is an important part of getting ready for this MCAT. Now, what is on the test? There is reading comprehension, that's the CARS, but there's also sciences. So we have biochemistry, which is going to be on both the Chem Phys and the biochem section. This is going to be like enzyme kinetics, Michelson-Menten kinetics, Lineweaver-Burke plots, metabolism. Don't go crazy with the metabolism. You do not have to memorize every pathway from your biochemistry class. That is unnecessary. They will often give you a figure So don't try to memorize everything here. Central dogma and protein trafficking are also a part of this. So like molecular biology, essentially. You're going to see general chemistry, atomic molecular structure, states of matter, kinetics, equilibrium, acids, bases, and electrochemistry. Those are big topics. So that's where you really want to shine, because those will show up all across the test. Acids and bases will show up in bio passages. They'll show up in biochemistry passages. They'll show up sometimes in physics passages. I've seen them do that. And they'll also show up in GChem passages, chemistry passages. It's a big topic. The same with kinetics and equilibrium. Pretty much what you'd expect. Organic chemistry, also chem phys and biochem. Nomenclature, know your isomers, reactions and mechanisms. But let me give you a little hint on this. Remember organic chemistry and how much that class sucked? Some of you might have liked it, but you guys don't need to know all of those mechanisms. So benzene chemistry, aromatic reactions like substituting benzenes, like orthometaparis stuff, forget it. You don't need it for the MCAT. Electrophilic addition, all those alkene and alkyne reactions, forget it. You don't need it for the MCAT. Radical reactions, forget it. You don't need it for the MCAT. Really, you're narrowed down to 2 basic chapters, maybe 3, depending on the way your organic book was set up, of your organic class when it comes to reactions. That's SN1, SN2, E1, and E2. That's nucleophilic addition reactions, basically reactions of ketones and aldehydes, and nucleophilic substitution reactions. Those are reactions with acid derivatives, carboxylic acids and their derivatives. That's it, guys. Most of the mechanisms and reactions you learned in organic chemistry are not on the MCAT. Yay! Feel bad for your DAT and OAT and PCAT brethren, because that's where they all are. So if you're going to pharmacy, dental, or optometry, you got to know those things. What you'll probably have to brush up on is separation identification techniques. Things like the ridiculous numbers of chromatographies there are, which most of you probably had minimal exposure to. Physics, you got forces, work energy, fluids, circuits, light and sound. The last 3, fluids, circuits, light and sound, are pretty common subjects for physics passages because they can be very much integrated into biology. It's like, how could they integrate fluids into biology? Circulatory system, yep. How can they integrate circuits into biology? The brain, the eyes, the ears, nerve cells in general, those are circuits. Actually, every cell is a circuit, by the way. Because if you think about it, you've got a potential difference. So you got a capacitor across the membrane. The resistor might be a voltage gated channel or something like that. And the ATP pump is your voltage source. Hey, there you go. You got a circuit. Light and sound, that's going to be eyes and ears. Like that can come up, honestly, that can actually come up in psych-soc as well. Kinematics I have grayed out because we don't see a lot of kinematics questions anymore. You're not going to see projectile vomiting. Yeah, you're probably not going to see projectile vomiting in the test. It might be during the test. Somebody might do that. But it's not something they can really wrap up into a physics passage that's biologically relevant anymore. So we don't see a lot of projectile motion on the test anymore. Biology, you got your genetics, micro, cell bio, physio, and notice how I grade out anatomy. Anatomy is a very minimal component of this. If you're trying to decide whether or not you should take that gross anatomy class before your MCAT, you don't need it because most of the anatomy is very basic, like what's connected to what, like kidney structure is usually related to its function. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know specific tissues and tissue types and all that kind of crazy stuff you might get into an anatomy or histology class. Psychology is going to be about perception, behavior, self-identity. Self-identity is going to get into cognition. of how we think about the world and all that fun stuff. So you'll see sort of a progression of taking stimuli, the perception, how we react to that, our behavior, and our self-identity, how we fit ourselves, how we perceive ourselves in society. And then sociology, social, cultural structure, and inequality. There's not a lot of sociology on this test. So again, if you're deciding, should I take psych or should I take soc? Should I take psych or should I take soc? Take psych. That's going to be the more important one. In fact, most of the sociology that you're going to need for this test, you learned in psychology. You probably didn't learn it in sociology, or at least you went into more depth in it in sociology. So stick to psychology on that one. And then math, you do need to know how to do math, but I'm going to tell you this right now, guys. Most MCAT questions do not require math. If you look at a question, you say, this is telling me to do a calculation, you're probably wrong. It's weird. You're probably going to have to go to a figure first. So it's about the graphs and the tables and the figures and things like that. It's about estimating more than it's about doing actual calculations. Every once in a while, about 7 to 8 total questions out of 230 might require you to use an actual calculation. And then trig concepts, you really just got to know your 0, 90, 30, 45, 60 degree angles for sine, cosine, and tangent, which isn't too bad. You should be able to construct any of those angles from some basic information. So I'm going to skip the foundational concepts based on time and then get right into CARS. So CARS is the reading comprehension portion, and that is broken down into 3 question types. And you want to start looking to recognize these question types when you see them. So the first of those is called Foundations of Comprehension. I like to call these retrieval questions. You're basically being asked to go find something in the text. And notice what it says, inferring meaning from rhetorical devices. Honestly, inferring meaning is really just saying, oh, the passage, we're just going to paraphrase the passage. The passage said it, we just got to paraphrase it. These are the simplest questions, although people can make them very complicated. Don't go down that road of like, oh, it implies this or it implies that, and I can infer this or I can infer that. Honestly, imply and infer mean the same thing as the passage states in standardized testing. In reality, no, that's not what they mean. But in standardized testing, the passage says it in some way, shape, or form. That's what imply and infer mean. Reasoning within the text says, okay, now I'm going to have to start making some judgments. Based on what the text says in one place, what is the author trying to do? This is where you're going to get a lot of your structure questions. What was the author trying to accomplish by stating this? Or what evidence did the author give for this? Things like that. Those are a little bit more difficult, but still ultimately the easier questions because, well, they're in the text. All the information you need is in the text itself. Now, the reasoning beyond the text are where you're going to see it's more difficult. This is where they give you brand new information in the question. They'll say this actually happened instead. What would the author think about it? Or which of the following most weakens the author's argument or most strengthens the author's argument? So now you have to make some real judgments outside of what the text actually said and make a connection. These are the hardest types of questions that you're going to run into. And these are the ones that most people will struggle with. Where can you get good CARS passage practice for like right now, even if you aren't just buying materials? Does anybody know the best place to get free CARS passages every single day? Nobody knows? Well, I feel awesome because I get to tell you this great resource. Jack Weston, MCAT CARS passage of the day. He has 365 passages, and he has one for every day of the year. Actually, I believe he has 366 because he does work for leap years. And you could do a CARS passage every single day for an entire year. If you haven't started studying for the MCAT, I would still start jumping into doing a CARS passage every day. It's really good practice, and Just look up Jack Weston with an I online and you will find that like tons of people use these passages. I use these passages. They're great practice. So look to identify the type of question as you're trying to do the question. So you want to try to anticipate what it is you're supposed to be doing. There actually exists a very similar thing for the sciences. And I think people don't think about this enough, is that there's 4 types of questions in the sciences as well. And these are what everybody doesn't know, is that they're called the SIRS. Like there's CARS and there's SIRS. CARS stand for critical analysis and reasoning skills. SIRS stand for scientific inquiry and reasoning skills. So it's basically the equivalent to the CARS. And again, you've got your basic question types. You want to try to identify them. The first of those is the knowledge of scientific concepts and principles. These are what I call the memory questions, or basically you're bringing something that you're supposed to know about science and applying it to the passage. So it might be a question about a catalyst. What does a catalyst do? Let's see if you guys know. What does a catalyst do? Or an enzyme, either one. Speeds up reactions, lowers activation energy. It increases or decreases the rate constant. It increases the rate constant. All 3 of those things could be answer choices for a question like this, and then they might give you one that's false. So the question might be, which of the following is not true about catalysts? And the false one would be that it decreases the rate constant, or it raises the activation energy, something like that. So it's basically taking some fact that you're supposed to know, or some series of facts you're supposed to know, and ask you about them. It may or may not be relevant to the passage itself. These questions may be completely separated from the passage. Heck, they are probably the discrete questions, or they could be kind of like a discrete question in a passage itself. Scientific reasoning and problem solving, this is where you're taking information from the passage and trying to make a prediction or trying to explain something that the passage is trying to illustrate. So you're probably going to have to bring your own knowledge in, but here's where you need to start pulling information from the passage. You don't need to know every fact under the sun. You do not need to be Sheldon Cooper for this test. In fact, Sheldon Cooper would do terrible on the MCAT, because just knowing lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of facts does not make you a better test taker, especially in a reading comprehension heavy test like the MCAT. You have to know how to use the figures and use the tables and use the data in the passage to answer the questions. The bulk of your questions are going to fall here. This is going to be most of the questions you're going to run into. The reasoning and design and execution of research, these only about 10% of the questions are like this, but it asks about ethics, and it asks about like what's the control, double blind, single blind, what's the confounding variable, what's the bias, the implicit bias or explicit bias in this experiment. So you're going to see that kind of stuff. A lot of times in the psych-soc passages, this comes up. And then finally, database and statistical reasoning, just basically using figures. And how many people have read journal articles and been looking at a figure and just gone like, I have no idea what this means with a figure or a table. That's unusual. Pick up a journal, a research journal, peer-reviewed research journal, and look at some of those figures. They are going to be crazy. There's going to be like 100 different lines on it, 100 points, and it's going to be confusing. In fact, most of you will probably be intimidated by at least a couple figures on the MCAT because they just look nuts, but you're still expected to figure out data from it. So, going to have to practice that. How many people here do research? How many are in a research group right now? Let's see about that. Just say yes if you're in a research group. So I'm going to tell you guys that are in research groups, I want you to ask your principal investigator, your PI, if you can present at your group meeting, meaning you're going to read a paper and present the information in the paper. They will help you do it, but if you're not already doing that, that will be great practice for what you're going to have to do in the MCAT, because you're going to have to pick apart the paper and understand the design of research, design of the research methods, and how the figures work and what the figures tell you. So if you're not doing research, you might buddy up with some people to do kind of the same thing with each other. Just get a reading club together and, you know, pick a journal article, maybe from Plus One or something like that. It's just a pretty accessible journal for free. And just pick an article and discuss it and talk about what are they doing? What is this in here for? What is this data telling you? Because that picking apart of the passage is what you're going to have to do on the MCAT. So it's great practice, something that people generally don't think about. So prereqs for this, things you want to make sure you have before you take the MCAT. I'm going to put some sort of check marks on here to say, here's the things I absolutely think you have to have. You got to have your bio done. You got to have your GChem done. You got to have your OChem done. You got to have your physics done. Absolutely. You can't get away without it. Got to have your stats done. Got to have your biochem done, and physiology done. You could probably get away without doing psych, soc, genetics, and micro before taking the MCAT. You can probably get away with it. Would it be nice to have them? Yes. If you can take a psych, a soc, a genetics, and a micro before you take the MCAT, that would be ideal. If you can't, I know sometimes you can't always make that work. Some other classes that can help, but probably not necessary: cell bio, immuno, and anatomy. Not necessary to take the MCAT at all in any way. I mean, will they help? Sure, but you will get all the information you need from these other classes. So my short list for anybody is to say bio, GChem, OChem, physics, stats, biochem, physio before you study for your MCAT. If you don't have those down, you will have to study some additional information on your own to really get up to speed. And I know if you don't have psych soc, you will have to do that. But honestly, psych soc is a lot of just, I'll tell you what, go to Khan Academy, get the 300-page psych soc document. That's your best place to go to get your psych soc knowledge. It'll probably help you most of all on studying up for the MCAT. So Khan Academy has a 300-page document of the notes for psych soc. Now, let's see, do you recommend take MPB 101 if it isn't part of your major? So for the physiology, yes, I do. MPB 101 is that physiology class that it will be very helpful to you on the MCAT. And there are a handful of med schools that do require it. Not all of them, of course. There's not many that require physiology, but it's a pretty big component of the MCAT. Most of the bio would probably fall in the physiology realm. So I do think it's a good one to have before you take the MCAT, yes. What resources are out there? I've already mentioned a few, which, yeah, it's equivalent to the MPB 110C, that's correct, which is like in and outside of major. So MPB majors, I think, do MPB 110C. There's a lot of resources out there. I've already mentioned a couple, which was Jack Weston, which I don't know why I don't have Jack Weston on here, but Jack Weston is a great resource. Khan Academy is a great resource. It is available through the end of this year, at least. So you don't have to worry about it disappearing. If you're studying for next year, so there's a plan in action. Somehow the Khan Academy materials will be still available for free, it is believed, into next year. We just don't know the whole picture on that yet. There is the official content, and I encourage you all to get the full AAMC official MCAT prep bundle at the minimum for prepping for the MCAT. That's the thing you get for free, this thing. You get this for free if you qualify for the fee assistance program. I do suggest that you have one from each of these categories. You get one set of content books, which could be Altius, Berkeley Review, Blueprint, Exam Crackers, Kaplan, or Princeton Review. They have content review books. Don't mix and match. Just use one set. Any set is fine, but just use one set. You should not like say get this book from here, like try to work out of 3 sets. Just get one set, borrow it from a friend, check it out from the library, check on Craigslist because people are constantly selling our half-price books is a great place to find MCAT books. Because as long as they're 2016 or beyond, they're valid. They're perfectly fine. You should get an online resource of practice problems. This can come from Blueprint. This can come from Kaplan, Princeton Review, UWorld. UWorld is a great resource. And then for practice tests, you want to have additional practice tests because the AMC only has 4. AMC only has 4. So places where you can get practice tests is Altius, Blueprint, Kaplan, Princeton Review. They have full-length practice tests that you can purchase. Plus, there's free ones out and about. So anybody who wants to get access to that, I actually have a whole list showing all these resources. If you want that, I'm going to put my email on the screen at the end. Just email me and I can get you a link to my prep worksheet for the MCAT, which will list a lot of these resources for you and places to get them. Plus, we have a lot of discount codes in there too. Never pay full price if you're buying this stuff, guys. Never pay this price. Can non-MPP majors get elective GE credit for MPP 101? Lillian took care of that. Thank you. All right. Now, self-prep or assisted prep. Some people need help prepping. Couple reasons, a couple things I see that you might need a class or a tutor or something like that. Take a practice test first. Just take a practice test. See how you do. If you take that practice test and you're like low 490s, like 490, 491, 492 or lower, you probably need to take a class or get a tutor because you're probably missing significant chunks of content or you're missing strategy or both. And you probably need help with that. If you're above that, you probably can self-prep. If you're in the high 490s, like 495 and up, you probably can self-prep for the MCAT and get to where you need to go. Maybe with a little assistance from a tutor for a couple things. Second reason why people might need assisted prep rather than self-prep. Maybe you are on your first practice test at a 495 or higher, but you have a hard time keeping yourself motivated. You have a hard time setting up a schedule, whatever it is. You need somebody to kick you in the butt. A prep class works really well for that because they give you a schedule and they will just kick you in the butt. So that's something that you can use those for. Now, I will say this is really one of those things that it's very specific to specific people. So that's why I want to encourage you, if you are a Davis student, I know there might be some non-Davis students here. If you're a Davis student, talk to me, set up an appointment with me, and we can talk about what you might benefit from as far as your particular path. That's what my job is here at the UC Davis HPA, is to help my students figure out the best plans for you for prepping. So definitely come and see me. When it comes to sociology, Soc 3 has the content that's appropriate for the MCAT. But like I said, you don't have to have Soc. So if you took Soc 1 or Soc 2, I don't think that's really an issue. All right. So last thing I want to say is give yourself time. Here's just a few little tidbits of like what it's going to take to get ready. If you're not doing classes, you want at least 3 months to prepare. If you are doing classes, if you are in school while you're studying, I'm going to say give yourself 6 months to prepare. Because when you're in school, you really need to make sure your grades don't slip. And if you're studying MCAT and in classes at the same time, you do run the risk of letting the MCAT subsume your grades. And that is not a good thing. So give yourself time, set up a plan, and then stick to it. The last thing before I move, we'll finish this up, is you want to review content and practice. There's a lot of bad advice out there. And one of the biggest bad advice things I see is to review all your content. It's like spend 3 to 4 months reviewing content and then start doing practice problems and practice tests. Here's why this is bad advice. I've seen people take a practice test before then and get like a 498. Then I've seen people study, then they study the content, they read the books, they take notes for like 3-4 months, and then they take another practice test and they get a 495. How are you going to feel about that? You went from a 498, spent 4 months studying the content, and then got a 495. You're going to feel obliterated because you're going to say to yourself, I just wasted 4 months and I studied so hard and then I got a lower score. And it goes back to what I was saying about the Sheldon Cooper thing. Like, just because you know stuff doesn't mean you can take the test, because you'll know all this content. You just don't know how the test is going to format it and ask you about it and all this stuff. So you have to do the practice questions. By the way, Jack Weston also now has a science passage of the day. So at the very least, do a Jack Weston cars and a Jack Weston science every single day while you're doing your reviewing of the content, just so you can get the feel for how the MCAT works. And then if you're doing it right, you only really need to spend 3 to 4 hours per day if you're spreading this out over a long period of time. You don't want to be doing like 12-hour study days. Like, the most you probably want to do is like 6 to 8 hours, but broken into chunks. And, you know, that's just effective study does not have to be crushing study. Make sense? All right. So here's my email address. Here's where you can find out more about the other programs that the HPA puts on for test prep, https hpa.ucdavis.edu/test prep. And if you are a Davis student, please set up an appointment and we can talk about what you need and get you where you need to go. And like, if you need a discount, we got discount codes for pretty much everyone. The only one I can't get a discount code for is Berkeley Review, because they absolutely don't do discount codes, because they firmly believe that they don't need to, and they don't. They're awesome. If you can afford Berkeley Review materials, they are great. They are fantastic. All righty, I'll open up the floor for questions. Otherwise, we will get you over to the wrap-up session. I think there's a wrap-up session, right, Lillian?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. So any questions from the crowd?
Hi. What does it mean when the table says that a break is optional? Does that mean that if you decide to take the break, someone else can still work on the test if they decide to not take the break?
But you have to do a break from the test, so you can't. You don't get extra time on your test. You would just move on to the next section. So optional means if I don't take the break, I would just start the cars section right away.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would say don't treat any of the breaks like they're optional, because you do need that time just to like come down. You don't have to spend the full 10 minutes, but you know, let yourself relax a little bit and refocus on the next section, because things get a little bit like, I mean, you're going to transfer from one type of question heavily to another type of question, especially between chem phys and cars. All right. Any other questions? That was a great question. The recordings are going to be probably sent out by Brielle in an email, I'm guessing. So hang tight on that. It's a computer-based test. So there, you can't, if you need accommodations to take it on paper, that does still exist, but that's a pretty hard exception to get these days. All righty, guys. Looks like we're running out of questions. So, and we only got about 5 minutes to transition over to the other section. So thank you guys for coming today. You've been great. And just remember that it's all in the head. This is not the hardest test you're ever going to take. There are other harder tests. This is just, if you play the game and you learn the rules, you're just going to crush this thing. You all got this. You got this.
Thank you.
All righty. Have a good one, and I will see you in the other room.